Never before in the history of the world were so many races and peoples mingled in a military effort as those that came together under the command of Marshal Foch. If we divide the human races into white, yellow, red, and black, all four were largely represented. Among the white races, there were Frenchmen, Italians, Portuguese, English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, Canadians, Australians, South Africans of both British and Dutch descent, New Zealanders. In the American Army, probably every other European nation was represented, with additional contingents from those already named, so that every branch of the white race figured in the ethnological total. There were representatives of many Asiatic races, including not only the volunteers from the native states of India, but elements from the French colony in Cochin, China, with Annam, Cambodia, Tonkin, Laos, and Quang Cha Wan. England and France both contributed many African tribes, including Arabs from Algeria and Tunis, Senegalese, Saharans, and many of the South African races. The red races of North America were represented in the armies of both Canada and the United States, while the Maoris, Samoans, and other Polynesian races were likewise represented. And, as in the American Army, there were men of German, Austrian, and Hungarian descent, and, in all probability, contingents also of Bulgarian and Turkish blood. It may be said that Foch commanded an army representing the whole human race, united in defense of the ideals of the Allies. It will be seen that more than 10 times the number of neutral persons were engulfed in the maelstrom of war. Millions of these suffered from it during the entire period of the conflict, 4 years, 3 months, and 15 days. A total of 1,567 days. For almost 4 years, Germany rolled up a record of victories on land and of piracies on and under the seas. Territory occupied by the Allies under the armistice of November 11, 1918. Dotted area, invaded territory of Belgium, France, Luxembourg, and Alsace-Lorraine to be evacuated in 14 days. Area in small squares, part of Germany west of the Rhine to be evacuated in 25 days and occupied by Allied and U.S. troops. Lightly shaded area to east of the Rhine, neutral zone. Black semicircles, bridgeheads of 30 kilometers radius in the neutral zone to be occupied by Allied armies. Little by little, day after day, piracies dwindled as the murderous submarine was mastered and its menace strangled. On the land, the Allies, under the matchless leadership of Marshal Ferdinand Foch and the generous cooperation of Americans, British, French, and Italians, under the great generals Pershing, Haig, Petain, and Diaz, wrested the initiative from von Hindenburg and Ludendorff late in July 1918. Then, in 115 days of wonderful strategy and the fiercest fighting the world has ever witnessed, Foch and the Allies closed on the Germanic armies the jaws of a steel trap. A series of brilliant maneuvers dating from the Battle of Chateau Thierry, in which the Americans checked the Teutonic rush, resulted in the defeat and rout on all the fronts of the Germanic commands. In that titanic effort, America's share was that of the final deciding factor. A nation unjustly titled the Dollar Nation, believed by Germany and by other countries to be soft, selfish, and wasteful, became overnight hard as tempered steel, self-sacrificing with an altruism that inspired the world, and thrifty beyond all precedent in order that not only its own armies, but the armies of the Allies might be fed ammunition. Leading American thought and American action, President Wilson stood out as the prophet of the democracies of the world. Not only did he inspire America and the Allies to a military and naval effort beyond precedent, but he inspired the civilian populations of the world to extraordinary efforts, efforts that eventually won the war. For the decision was gained quite as certainly on the wheat fields of Western America, in the shops and the mines and the homes of America, as it was on the battlefield. This effort came in response to the following appeal by the President. These, then, are the things we must do, and do well, besides fighting, the things without which mere fighting would be fruitless. We must supply abundant food for ourselves and for our armies and our seamen not only, but also for a large part of the nations with whom we have now made common cause, in whose support and by whose sides we shall be fighting. We must supply ships by the hundreds out of our shipyards to carry to the other side of the sea, submarines or no submarines, what will every day be needed there. Abundant materials out of our fields and our mines and our factories, with which not only to clothe and equip our own forces on land and sea, but also to clothe and support our people for whom the gallant fellows under arms can no longer work. To help clothe and equip the armies with which we are cooperating in Europe, and to keep the looms and manufactories there in raw material. Coal to keep the fires going in ships at sea and in the furnaces of hundreds of factories across the sea. Steel out of which to make arms and ammunition both here and there. Rails for worn-out railways back of the fighting fronts. Locomotives and rolling stock to take the place of those every day going into pieces. Everything with which the people of England and France and Italy and Russia have usually supplied themselves, but cannot now afford the men, the materials, or the machinery to make. I particularly appeal to the farmers of the South to plant abundant foodstuffs as well as cotton. They can show their patriotism in no better or more convincing way than by resisting the great temptation of the present price of cotton and helping on a large scale to feed the nation and the peoples everywhere who are fighting for their liberties and for our own. The variety of their crops will be the visible measure of their comprehension of their national duty. The response was amazing in its enthusiastic and general compliance. No autocracy issuing an ukase could have been obeyed so explicitly. Not only did the various classes of workers and individuals observe the President's suggestions to the letter, but they yielded up individual right after individual right in order that the work of the government might be expedited. Governmental activities ceased functioning after the war. Food Administration, Fuel Administration, Espionage Act, Alien Property Custodian, with extension of time for certain duties, agricultural stimulation, housing construction except for shipbuilders, control of telegraphs and telephones, export control. These functions were extended. Control over railroads, to cease within 21 months after the proclamation of peace. The War Finance Corporation, to cease to function 6 months after the war with further time for liquidation. The Capital Issues Committee, to terminate in 6 months after the peace proclamation. The Aircraft Board, to end in 6 months after peace was proclaimed, and the government operation of ships within 5 years after the war was officially ended. President Wilson, generally acclaimed as the leader of the world's democracies, phrased for civilization the arguments against autocracy in the Great Peace Conference after the war. The President headed the American delegation to that conclave of world reconstruction. With him as delegates to the conference were Robert Lansing, Secretary of State, Henry White, former ambassador to France and Italy, Edward House, and General Tasker Bliss. Representing American labor at the International Labor Conference held in Paris simultaneously with the Peace Conference were Samuel Gompers, President of the American Federation of Labor, William Green, Secretary-Treasurer of the United Mine Workers of America, John Alpine, President of the Plumbers Union, James Duncan, President of the International Association of Granite Cutters, and Frank Morrison, Secretary of the American Federation of Labor. Estimating the share of each Allied nation